Hello and welcome to Microsoft ISV conference. Microsoft is and will continue to be a partner-led company. 95% of our revenue is made with or through our partners. Independent software vendors or ISVs are a cornerstone of our partner strategy. We work daily, side by side with ISVs around the world to help them build the best solutions, go to market and sell, leveraging our marketplace, co-selling with our account managers or through partner-to-partner associations. We are constantly looking for new ways to support ISVs in their success, and this session is one of the ways we do exactly that. Skilling and enablement are two dimensions where we can help, and therefore we want to start by showing a token of our appreciation with a treat and also making sure you are engaged. Microsoft already makes available to all our partners and customers thousands of hours of free training organized by learning paths and updated based on the evolution of our product portfolio. You can find all of this info and many more in Microsoft Learn, aka.ms/learn. This learning mindset of Microsoft is set from the top by our CEO, and I quote, always keep learning. You stop doing useful things if you don't learn. Therefore, to help you in your learning efforts, we are handing out a limited number of free exam vouchers. These vouchers are redeemable for dozens of exams, as you can see in the chart, covering all solution areas. So it's a treat we are providing to the first ones that send an email to the address in the slide, mkportugal@microsoft.com. I repeat, mkportugal@microsoft.com. Approval in the exams are a sign of deep expertise on the subjects, grant certifications, and are prerequisites for several partners' silver and gold competences. I'm looking forward to have your competencies and certifications posted on LinkedIn. With that said, we have an amazing agenda for the next 55 minutes. It covers several topics we believe can be very helpful for all of you, but feel free to suggest additional topics you feel valuable so we can address them in other sessions during the next months. You are also free to engage and should engage with me and all other speakers of the session on the Building the Future platform during the event and on LinkedIn at any time. Today, we'll start with Microsoft experts presenting several topics. João Salvado will cover serverless, Ricardo Fiel will cover DevOps and shorter development cycles with Azure Pipelines and GitHub, and Alexandre Vieira will follow with containers and managing microservices. We'll end with Pedro Serrano, founder and managing partner of an ISV that has been working closely with us, CAVEDIGITAL. We want to work with all ISVs, and we hope this ISV conference shows our commitment and availability to do so. Thank you very much for attending, and I leave you in the very capable hands of João Salvado.
Hello everyone, my name is João Salvado and I'm a cloud solution architect here at Microsoft. I'm honored to present the first part of this Microsoft ESV conference around the serverless topic. As all good things begin with a story, let's talk about the history of cloud development. So before I talk to you about serverless, I want to discuss some history of how apps have been built through the years and how that led us to the computing options that we have today. In the past, you used to buy your own hardware and software. You used to have to run it in your own data centers and deal with the multiple of questions like number of servers, physical security, hardware failure, software patching, backup, and many others. Essentially, a lot of questions, not at all might be related with running your business. Then we moved to a cloud world where you could leverage infrastructure as a service cloud and leverage the cloud provider for handling security, server, and storage for you. After that, we moved to a next step. We moved in a cloud history of development to the PaaS world, where you only need to manage application and service. Finally, in this happy ending history, we have the serverless that allows you to focus only on the business logic. The latest in this series of evolution is serverless computing, which further abstracts the underlying infrastructure from you and allows you to focus only on a single question. How are you going to build your app to achieve the best results for your business, or whatever it is that you are trying to do with your apps? Whether it is code to delight your customer through a great experience or the logic to communicate securely with a business partner. That is where most organizations want to spend their creative energies on. And serverless allows you to do just that. Focus on your code and forget about the infrastructure. This is why we believe it's the best platform for the next generation of apps. Now, let's jump into explaining what are the benefits of serverless. So serverless, it's a system where you don't have to think about servers at all. So for you, they are invisible. In the serverless world, we have an abstraction of the servers. Of course, the servers exist. It's just not your responsibility. The infrastructure and configuration of operating systems and management of the server is all handled by the cloud provider. Serverless is event-driven oriented, so applications react to triggers and events in real time. You do not need to think about questions like how much will I provision? Just keep with the traffic and events as they occur, and the serverless will handle all the scaling for you. And when you think about critical questions like how will we pay for it? You just need to know that you will pay efficiently on a pay-per-use model where you only pay for what you use. So when we talk about serverless, the first thing that obviously comes to the mind is function as a service. Basically, the ability to execute custom code on demand without having to worry about where the code is executing on, or how it will scale if the demand goes up. This is what Azure Function does for you. Now, let me talk about the logic apps. This service was actually introduced before functions, and I want to talk about why this service is an important part of the serverless story. Imagine you are drawing a flowchart that represents a certain process in your business. For example, when a new customer record is created in a CRM system, and go ahead and create a new project in the project management system, and then send a notification email to 3 people, let's say. We see a lot of processes like this all the time. What if you could just convert these flowcharts with a few clicks of your mouse into real applications that actually do those things? Well, Azure Logic Apps effectively does that for you. Through a visual design experience, you can create workflows that could have multiple steps. And each step could be performed by a different first-party or third-party service, or even an Azure function that you might have written, as we explained it before. And goes without saying that you don't have to worry about where all of those things are being processed. You focus only on the what, not on the how. Logic apps can be seen as a serverless and low code at the same time. Now let's talk about event grid. Modern computing is all about events, and these events needs to be responded to. Whether it's IoT device sending signals to a central location, user performing some actions on their mobile app, or even some systems communicating with each other. All of these are examples of event-driven scenarios in which there are certain events that needs to be processed. But how do we manage all these events? This is where Event Grid comes in. This service makes it super easy by providing a single, simple interface for managing all your events. Okay, now that we have a basic building blocks of serverless computing, what do you want to do next? We are building applications after all. They need to talk to databases, enable authentications for the users, receiving events from IoT devices, and apply some kind of intelligence in the apps. And how do we achieve all those things in our app? This is what Azure provides for us, a seamless experience to connect multiple services like Cosmos DB, Azure Active Directory, IoT Hub, Event Hub, Stream Analytics, Cognitive Service, you name it, are a lot of services that you can use. All of these services together create the Azure Serverless Application Platform. And by using these pieces, you can compose your applications. Of course, all these things integrated with IAD support, integrated DevOps, where you can configure your continuous integration and continuous deployment, pipelines with the local development, where you can also do your things locally and deploy to the cloud. You can use Monitor for monitoring your serverless applications, and you can use debug history. So all things connect together in the end. So we have an event-driven serverless platform that is always growing, where we have constantly new services being added to it. So beside the ones that we have already discussed, there are a lot of another examples. So one other example is, for example, the API management, where you can have modern APIs gateways for backend service. Another example of a serverless that it's not described here is the SQL serverless pools that enables you to analyze your big data in seconds to minutes without the need to create a SQL dedicated pool. So it allows you to do queries, for example, ad hoc. And there are a lot of examples where we could apply this. So let's look through some examples and see how they can help in the serverless world. So the first scenario that we are going to look, it's in the retail. So we could have a request that it's made to a web app from a certain retailer, and this request would be queued in a service bus. Then this service bus would send the message to the function. So the function will be triggered for that and would process that message and sends the output to a Cosmos DB. So this is an example on the retail, but we could also apply the same example on other scenario, as long as it's a web application backend scenario. So, for example, in a manufacturing scenario, we could have a company that uses IoT devices to monitor their machines and detecting anomalies. These IoT devices could send the data to IoT Hub, where some special conditioning data could be routed to an Azure function. The Azure function could then process this message and call a logic app that with its connectors could request a device repair. So in this case, we are actually using two serverless services. We are using the Azure function, and we are also using here the logic app. We are using the best of each world. So we are using the Azure function to do a processing in the code, and we are using the native connectors from the logic app to request our repair. So here we have another example, which is a conversational bot processing scenario. So in an hospitality, we could have a customer requesting through a conversational interface regarding available vacations accommodations. A serverless bot running in a function will decipher the request using, for example, Louise, the language understanding, and could call another function to process the requests and send the request response to the original requester. Another example that we could look would be the real-time file processing. So in a healthcare scenario, we could have a patient PDF records being uploaded to a blob storage. Then we would have an Azure function being triggered by that event, and it will decompose the PDF file and make use of the OCR detection from cognitive service to extract the information. It could finally save the data in a SQL database for easy database queries. Another example that we could have would be the financial service, where we could have a database that it's analyzed and cleaned by an Azure function every 15 minutes, and it would remove the duplicate entries based on the business logic. For example, this is an example of an automation schedule task. Now let's look at a hands-on example where we have a Twitter post sentiment with Logic App and Azure functions. So now let me present you one example on how you can use the serverless platform. So in this case, we have a logic app that is detecting when a new tweeted is posted. So we are using the built-in connector to the Twitter, and we are searching for the tag hashtag Azure. We are checking this every 15 minutes. So as soon as we get this hashtag with Azure, we are going to detect the sentiment from the tweet test. So After getting the sentiment, what we are going to do is that we are going to call an HTTP trigger function. So we will call the HTTP trigger BTF function, and in the request body, we will send a score. Now let's look to this function and see exactly what it is doing. So we see here the HTTP trigger BTF function. Basically, this function is receiving that score that we send from here, okay? And it's assuming that initially the value is green. So if the score is less than 0.3, we will send the category as red. If it's less than 0.6, we will send as yellow, okay? And basically, we will send this back to our logic app. Then we will have a condition here in our logic app. What this condition will do is that basically it will use the body that received from the function, and we will check if it's equal to red. If it's not equal to red, then nothing happens. In the case that in fact is equals to red, we will send an email. In this case, I'm sending an email to myself, and I'm sending a subject with Twitter, negative tweet sentiment detected by, and I'm appending here who tweeted. Finally, in the body of the email, I'm sending here the tweeted test. Now we can also look to an example of this running. So we have here a case of this happening. So this is a past run where a tweeted it was posted. So here we can see the tweeted that it was posted, and we can see the sentiment associated with this tweet. So we see here the score. This score was sent to the HTTP trigger function. The HTTP trigger function received this body and processed and responds with the red. After responded with the red, the condition was true. So it was a bad news. And basically, this ended up by sending an email to myself, where we can see here the subject and the body of the email with the Twitter, as I've explained. So this is a simple example on how you can use the serverless platform. It was a pleasure to show you how you can use serverless platform. See you next time. Bye.
Hello, everyone. Now we're going to talk a bit about how to shorten development cycles with Azure Pipelines and GitHub. When we think about digital transformation, there are some ideas to how to make it happen. But if we think about the software development part, a lot has changed, but many companies are still treating that as they have historically. So they want to digitally transform their customers and their companies, but the approach to software development and delivery has been the same. And that means a lot of manual work, a lot of risk in deployments, not so many deployments per week or per day even. And that hurts the ability to really drive a digital transformation. So one of the common topics when we talk about effective digital transformation is DevOps. And DevOps is really the union of people, processes, and technologies to deliver continuous value to users. So the people part is also known as the organizational culture part. Then there's the processes, how every company that builds and delivers its software. And finally, the technologies and or tools that make all of this possible. Now, DevOps, it's really a loop where we plan what we want to do. We do it, so it's the develop part. We deliver it to systems, development, integration, QA, production, and so on. And we operate those systems and those applications to understand with telemetry the user behavior, the application behavior, and the infrastructure behavior. And this is a loop. So based on that feedback, we plan again what to do next. So for each of the stages of DevOps, plan is very focused on collaboration between all of the team members, defining workflows, making sure that security and compliance is in place, and finally making sure that we are continuously improving what we are doing and how we are doing to deliver that value to end users. What we've seen is that some companies do DevOps better than others. So the adoption of DevOps really varies between the maturity of companies. But the top 7% of DevOps performers, we've seen that they have 46 times more frequent code deployments. So it's very common to see companies deploying multiple times a day to production. They also deploy faster to production. They have a much lower rate of failures, in this case 7 times, and a much higher recovery time, or a much faster recovery time when there's an outage or an issue in a system. So these are the kind of numbers that a good DevOps transformation can make real. Now, there's a lot of DevOps tools out there, but GitHub has some unique value propositions for digitally transforming a company. Think about how teams collaborate, and GitHub, being the home of developers, is built for collaboration between developers. So it's the home for developers. Then most of the open source code in the world is hosted in GitHub. And most of the companies in the world are using some form of open source in their projects. And GitHub has a strong security and compliance features that allow to scan for vulnerabilities in open source libraries and immediately alert if we are using something that's vulnerable, and a lot more to that. Then there's code to cloud DevOps, and we'll see more what this means, but we want to go from an idea to production as quickly and as effective as possible. And finally, attracting and retaining developer talent, which is a huge challenge today. If GitHub is the home for developers, then it's easier if the tool for DevOps is already the one that they are used to. So end-to-end code to cloud DevOps really means that all of the DevOps loop is elastic, is fully managed. We are always using the latest versions of open source libraries, any language, any operating system, any cloud or on-prem. So we want to deploy anywhere, any kind of application. And GitHub also has the largest ecosystem on the planet for DevOps. So we, by using GitHub, can have all of this loop in a tool and make sure that the developers are comfortable and system engineers are comfortable and are using what they know already. With Azure, GitHub provides a seamless cloud experience. There's automated workflows with GitHub Actions. There's end-to-end traceability and governance with Azure Boards. So if you are doing Scrum or Kanban or CMMI, you are covered with Azure Boards linked to GitHub. And then you can even authenticate yourself with GitHub using Azure AD credentials. So this is really the value proposition when you combine GitHub with Azure, is using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code for the development part, delivering with Azure Boards, so you can use GitHub Actions or use Azure Pipelines or use both, and finally operate with Azure Monitor and govern with Azure Policy, and make sure that Azure Security Center takes care of notifying you of and preventing security breaches and so on. Now, Azure Pipelines was part of Azure DevOps, and it's still part of Azure DevOps, but you can use it as a standalone tool, just like you can use Azure Boards. And it's really about covering the CI/CD part of DevOps, so continuous integration and continuous delivery. It's cloud-hosted pipelines for Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. Again, any language, any platform, any cloud or on-prem. Strong support for containers and Kubernetes, incredible support actually for containers and Kubernetes. A lot of support for open source. And you can define stages and how your software goes from one stage to the other. And if there is approvals, how you want to move from development to QA, development to, or QA to production, and so on. So what if you are not using everything we saw before? Well, you can still use IntelliJ or Eclipse or some other IDE for the develop part, deliver with something like Jenkins or Maven or Packer or Terraform, and operate with Grafana, Ansible, Elk, or whatever you are using, and still use GitHub as that collaboration platform. And for the deliver part, Azure Pipelines also support every single tool that's here. So it's not really about choosing one or the other. It's really about using the best possible scenario for what makes sense in your organization. So let's see an end-to-end example of using code to production using GitHub and Azure Pipelines. So I have this project on GitHub. It's an Node.js application, which is containerized with Docker. That's irrelevant for the demo. And I'm using Visual Studio Code to edit my application. So I want to go to, I'm on branch main, and I want to go to index. There is an error here, so let me fix this. And now I could use the tooling on Azure VS Code for GitHub, but let's use the command line. So now if I do a git status again, there is a change that I need to do. So what I'm going to do is fix message. I'm going to create a branch, and I'm going to add this change to fix rogue spelling. And push to origin fix MSG. So this could be done using Visual Studio Code or just any other IDE. If I go to GitHub now, I can see that there is a new branch here, and this is now being a build has been triggered in Azure DevOps to make sure that everything is working. But what I want to do is I want to open a pull request. So I'm collaboratively working with my team in this case. So I want to bring those changes onto the main branch so they can be deployed to production. I could leave a comment here from my team or mention people and so on and so forth. So when I create a pull request, I can see that this has no conflicts. Let's merge with the main branch. So if I go now to pipelines, there is already, and this is the Azure Pipelines, there is already a pipeline running, which is building my application and running tests and generating the Docker image. So this is part of an agent. An agent runs the tasks that we want to run to build and test our application. Being a Docker container, so it's Node.js in a Docker container, so it's using Node 8, it's installing with npm install, it's doing npm tests, it's running unit tests, it's building Docker image, and finally pushing the Docker image into the registry. When this happens, because it was the main branch, a new release has just been triggered, and this will take our application from development to production. And you see there is a pre-deployment approval here. So if we go back to one that has already ran, I will need to manually approve, because I said so, a change from dev to production. And there's many other things you can do here. Automate with monitoring and telemetry and deciding automatically if something should be transferred to production. I hope that was clear. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Hello. Welcome to this session about containers and managing microservices. My name is Alexandre Vieira. I'm a cloud solution architect, and I'm passionate about cloud technologies and how they can empower us to do great things. In this session, I will project the power of using containers, talk about microservices architectures, and how Microsoft could help on this journey. Containerization is a fundamental technology nowadays to build, ship, and run software. I'm sure that most of you are already using containers or considering to use in the near future. There's a lot of good reasons that justify the adoption of containers with both technical and business impact. Getting agility or velocity is one of the major benefits. It translates to getting things done quickly. Should sound good for any company, big or small. Portability comes next. Containers are more portable than virtual machines and easy to move around, so you could dodge any vendor lock-in. Then, with density, it's possible to consolidate and do more with less. It translates in optimizations and saving money. It's what matters in the end of the day. Scalability is another key benefit to match the unpredictable fluctuations in the user demand. With a more technical view, containers also provide great flexibility. Containers are mostly Linux, but you can leverage Windows containers as well. You can run containers in your own data center or in any public cloud provider. It's suitable for traditional application, also called monolithical, or with a microservices architecture. And finally, it could also be used for any language or framework of your choice. Microsoft is strongly committed to provide the best overall experience with containers. With containers on Azure, you will get flexibility or options to deploy containers in different services, such as Azure App Service, Azure Kubernetes Service, and third-party solutions, such as OpenShift. You will get productivity by building the containers directly with Visual Studio and by storing the container images in the container registry, and leverage a full pipeline of continuous integration, continuous delivery with GitHub and Azure DevOps, and many more possibilities with all the services in the Azure Marketplace. And finally, we hope to provide trust by providing full observability on containers health with Azure Monitor, end-to-end security with Azure Security Center, and identity and access management with Azure Active Directory. Microsoft is doing huge investments in this space to guarantee that with Azure, you could tick all the boxes for your container requirements. A key Azure service to host applications with containers is the Azure App Service. The Azure App Service integrates with public registries such as Docker Hub or your own private registry with Azure Container Registry and can use CI/CD pipelines to automate the deployment. It's a fully managed PaaS service with high availability built in, auto-patching, etc. It's very simple to get started, simple to scale, manage, and monitor. It's a hyperscale service that is being used by over 2 million apps and sites. Alongside the usage of containers, there is also a trend to build applications with the microservices architecture approach. The microservices approach is a bit more complex than the traditional monolithical approach, but in the upside has a lot of advantages. The application functionality is segregated into smaller components called microservices that run on its own container and typically exposes its own API. This way, each microservice can run independently, and this characteristic creates the need for a container orchestrator that we will see next. A microservices architecture may be deployed without containers, but in reality, most of the microservices implementations goes hand in hand with a container orchestrator, such as Kubernetes. The container orchestration handles a bunch of tasks that are critical to guarantee that everything runs smoothly. And when talking about container orchestration, the uncontested king is Kubernetes. Let's deep dive on some of the reasons. It's a mature project and it's being widely used in the industry. It's supported by the major providers of public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud, so it doesn't represent any vendor lock-in. And part of this success, it's based on a large and active open source community. Microsoft plays a key role in this community and is one of the biggest contributors for the project. Brendan Burns is the co-founder of Kubernetes and leads this community effort at Microsoft. Microsoft has a strong commitment with Kubernetes on Azure. It starts with the development tools, and the highlight here goes to GitHub by supporting the code repositories and DevOps workflows. In the platform side, the highlight goes to the Azure Kubernetes service that provides a managed service to run the Kubernetes engine. And to give back to the community, Microsoft maintains and contributes several open source projects that gravitate around Kubernetes. The highlight here goes to Helm, that is a package manager that provides a simple way to define, install, and upgrade applications on Kubernetes. The growth of Azure Kubernetes Service has been staggering. It's one of the most popular Azure services, and it's already trusted by hundreds of customers. I have cherry-picked from this mosaic of logos the case of Maersk. Because when we talk about containers, Maersk is the reference. They have more than 4 million shipping containers to transport goods around the globe. Each container has their own IP to send telemetry with an IoT architecture. It's funny that the leading shipping container uses the leading container orchestrator in Azure. In particular, they leverage AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, to host a customer service application. Microsoft has been learning from these customer success stories in order to establish a set of proven best practices and recommendations. The recommendations are not just documented, they are built into the platform so they can be proactive and easily actionable based on the real usage telemetry. You can find these recommendations in the advisor section of the Azure portal. Of course, security is critical for any environment, and for an environment with different containers talking to each other and exposing APIs, sometimes in the public internet, we could say that without the proper security, all of our efforts could be jeopardized. Azure provides built-in policies that ensure guardrails for the execution of the applications running with containers. And with Security Center, it identifies automatically possible threats and actions to remediate and protect. Looking ahead after deployment, it's vital to think about operational excellence. To this end, Azure provides integrated observability into the Kubernetes cluster with detailed insights on application telemetry, the container health, application logs, etc., and provides an SLA, service level agreement, to ensure that you meet the reliability requirements of your application. Lastly, to ensure that we get velocity with containers, but at the same time we never lose control, It's important to consider the unified management capabilities that Azure provides. It starts with the identity and access management capabilities of Azure Active Directory, then applying role-based access control to the resources, then applying your policies, and continuous monitoring to ensure security, reliability, performance, the best user experience, and cost optimizations. I hope that you enjoyed the session and that I was able to transmit the power of containers and Kubernetes for your next killer app. I leave here some resources to learn more, explore case studies, check the service roadmap, and start an Azure trial if you don't have already access to Azure. Thank you for your time. Hope that you stay safe and healthy and that you enjoy the rest of the event. Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Pedro Serrano, and I'm managing partner for CAVEDIGITAL and founder. We're an independent software vendor, so we have our own product, and we're a Microsoft Gold certified partner. We help customers modernizing their chain of command and their governance structures. And we do this by using our product, Smart Governance, where we quickly implement the customer, typically enterprise-sized customers, their decision-making ecosystem. So we're talking about hierarchies, power to act rules, committees, boards, and usually we do this in typically around 2 weeks. So very good quick win for a customer. I've been invited by Microsoft to share with you a few scenarios on how we're using Azure and how we're leveraging our business on top of it. And obviously, by what we're looking at, we're not only using it and taking advantage on our day-to-day operations, but also to go after innovation, to go after improvement. And last but not least, whenever we need to improvise something, we also turn to Azure. Focusing on our day-to-day operations, a few practical examples are not only our product offering. We have SaaS products in our product offering, where we're using containerized web apps, Azure SQL, blob storage, cold storage, and stuff like that. But we also are using it internally for taking care of our backups, for automating tasks and internal procedures using Azure Functions, connecting with Power Automate and Office 365, and also some internal systems. We also use Azure DevOps for all our development work. So, developing software, right? And we on a very it's a very common scenario to raise temporary environments for testing certain tasks, or for testing technical procedures. We typically raise temporary environments for staging complex customer interventions. Whenever we have to do something more complex or out of the ordinary in a customer, we raise an environment that mimics what is on the customer tenant, so that we test that first on our side. And also when we need to do specific troubleshooting, where we need to mimic what is happening in the customer infrastructure, we also do that. Regarding innovation, we're turning to Azure for to obviously for our SaaS offering, where we're confident that we can scale if we need. We feel secure more than we would be on an infrastructure that would be secured by us, because and there will be very few companies in the world that will be able to live up to the level of engineering that you have on Microsoft Azure. And with this, we're more comfortably and in a more agile fashion extending our mobility capabilities that we have in our product offering. We seamlessly are integrating with it's transparent with the My Apps portal. We on the customer tenant when the customer wants to use that. The same is true for Azure AD application proxy. We're integrating with Microsoft Teams, so this is something that we're continuously evolving. None of our products is the product that is stopped in time. We're continuously evolving the product, so every week we're making releases, and we're extending the integration that we're doing with Microsoft Teams using the Azure Bot framework and other services on the Microsoft stack. Specifically on the Azure stack, and in our roadmap, we're going to extend these Teams apps, let's call it like that, also with Azure Cognitive Services. And at the same time, we're also integrating with Microsoft Intune to also allow the apps that we deploy in the customer's devices. Especially in bring your own devices scenarios, so that the customer can maintain control of the corporate data and of the corporate licensing, etc. Going into how we turn to Azure regarding improvisation and unforetold situations. We all face scenarios where we need to find a quick fix for something, where we need to find a quick alternative. Maybe something is broken on the customer side, but we want to help them to get as fast up and running as soon as possible. So maybe we raise something on our tenant to allow them to give them time to deal with the situation on their end. Maybe we need to find a quick fix to something that is not working on one of our deployments, or which is maybe the most common scenario for improvisation. Maybe you find yourself in a situation where you have a very short time frame to react to that situation, and the requirements to live up to that challenge exceed the ones that you have available in-house. Okay, during the big confinement, we faced a specific situation like that, where we closed a new deal with a customer. So our entire workforce was working from home. The entire workforce on the customer side, they were all also working from home. But when they were all forced to go out and work from home, they were stuck with the scenario that they had up until the moment where all suppliers were required to establish site-to-site VPN with them. Okay. Obviously, with everyone working from home, this is not an ideal scenario because no one is in sight. Okay, so basically we improvised. So we turned to Azure. We raised on our tenant an infrastructure, a VPN infrastructure using the Azure Vpn Gateway and using a Linux VM to serve as a router. so that our tech team was able to establish a site-to-site VPN connection with the customer, while at the same time having the an abstraction layer that would allow everyone to be working from home, all on different sites. Let's call it like that. It's also interesting that we were able to automate how this specific solution cost saving is managed. So whenever we're not using it, it automatically goes down, so that we're not so on hours that we're not using it, we're not having to pay as if we were using it, right? As if it was running. So that's also a good solution. So with this, thanks a lot for your time and for your interest. And I leave you with the invitation to check our website and get to know our product as well. And I'm available for any information that you might need from us. Thanks. Cheers.